it was our third wedding anniversary. The December air was crisp, and our home was warm with soft candlelight and the gentle hum of our favorite playlist. I had planned the evening meticulously: dinner, roses, and a necklace I knew she had been eyeing for months. But as I walked into the dining room, my wife's face held a different kind of anticipation. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. Her hands clutched a small gift box, tied with a ribbon. Curious, I set my own gift aside and took the box from her. Her gaze lingered on me, searching my expression as I pulled the ribbon loose and opened the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper. No jewelry, no trinkets, just a piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked with a faint smile, trying to lighten the mood. She hesitated. "Just read it." Unfolding the paper, I recognized it immediately: a pregnancy test result. Positive. My heart skipped a beat. "You're pregnant." She nodded, but her expression wasn't filled with the joy I had imagined. Instead, it was shadowed by something heavier. "But there's more," she said softly, barely above a whisper. My stomach tightened. "More?" Her hands were trembling now. "This baby, it's not yours." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My world tilted as I tried to process what she had just said. I don't understand," I stammered. Tears welled in her eyes. "Before we got married, I had someone in my life. My first love. It was over, or at least I thought it was. But then, he came back into town a few months ago, and her voice broke. It was a mistake. A one-time thing. But this happened." I stood there, paralyzed. Anger, betrayal, confusion, all the emotions collided at once. "You mean to tell me," I said, my voice low and tight, "that on our anniversary, you thought the best gift would be telling me you're carrying his child?" She sobbed, her tears falling freely now. "I didn't want to hide it from you. You deserve the truth. And I still love you. I want us to walk through this, together." For a moment, I said nothing. My mind was racing, and yet it felt like everything had stopped. The room, once filled with warmth and light, now felt cold and foreign. "Do you even know what you're asking of me?" I finally said, my voice breaking. She stepped closer, reaching for my hand. "I'm asking for your forgiveness. For a second chance. For us to find a way forward, even if it's the hardest thing we'll ever do." I pulled my hand back, the weight of her betrayal too fresh, too raw. "I need time," I said, stepping away. I can't do this right now." Her sobs followed me as I walked out of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The night ended not with love and celebration, but with shattered trust and an uncertain future. And as I sat alone in the cold silence, I wondered if some truths were better left untold, or if this painful honesty could somehow be the start of healing, however impossible it seemed. The following days were a blur of silence and separation. I stayed in the guest room, avoiding conversations, while she tiptoed around the house, her presence a constant reminder of the storm we were now caught in. I wasn't angry all the time. Sometimes, I just felt hollow, like everything we had built together was a facade, crumbling under the weight of a single truth. But when the anger came, it was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to break something, to demand why she hadn't chosen me over him in that fleeting moment. Yet, beneath all that anger and pain, a small, stubborn part of me still loved her. That made it worse. One evening, about a week after the anniversary disaster, she knocked on the door of the guest room. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. I hesitated, then nodded. "All right." She stepped inside, her face pale and worn, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, much like me. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to fix," she began, her voice shaky. I've replayed that night 1,000 times in my head, wondering why I did it, why I let him back into my life for even a moment. And the truth is, I don't have a good answer. I made a terrible, selfish mistake. But I swear to you, it was never because I stopped loving you. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, trying to process her words. Then why? Why risk everything we had for someone who wasn't even in your life anymore? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I was weak. Because I let nostalgia cloud my judgment. I thought I'd moved on from him, but when he showed up, it stirred up so many feelings I hadn't dealt with. But the second it happened, I regretted it. I hated myself for betraying you. I shook my head, the anger flaring up again. And now there's a child. His child. How am I supposed to move past that? Every time I look at you, or at that baby, it'll remind me of what you did. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. I know. And I don't expect you to just forgive me and pretend this never happened. But I need you to know that I want this baby to have a chance at life, and I want to be a better person for them, for both of us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild what I've broken. But if you can't do this, if you can't stay, I'll understand. The vulnerability in her voice cut through my defenses. For a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with. But I also saw the cracks in our foundation, the scars that might never fully heal. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I need to figure that out for myself. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. Take all the time you need. Just, please don't give up on us without trying. The days turned into weeks. I sought counsel from friends, from a therapist, from my own heart. Slowly, I began to see the situation for what it was, a tragedy born of human weakness, but not necessarily the end of everything. One night, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly rubbing her small but growing belly. I sat down beside her, the silence between us heavy but not as unbearable as before. If we do this, I said, it's going to take time. A lot of it. And it's going to hurt. I don't know if I'll ever love that child the way I would if it were mine. But if you're willing to fight for us, I'll try to fight too. Her tears came again, but this time they were tears of relief. She reached for my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't pull away. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days, awkward conversations, and moments of doubt. But in that fragile moment of connection, we decided to take the first step toward rebuilding what had been broken. The journey ahead was unlike anything I had ever imagined. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into therapy, both individually and as a couple. It was grueling. Every session felt like ripping open a wound, but I knew that if there was any hope of salvaging our marriage, we couldn't shy away from the pain. She was relentless in her efforts to rebuild my trust. She deleted all contact with her former lover, shared every detail of her day without me even asking, and made space for my anger and my doubts. At first, I saw her efforts as nothing more than guilt, maybe even desperation. But over time, I began to see them for what they truly were, genuine remorse and a commitment to making things right. As her pregnancy progressed, I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, every kick and flutter of the baby was a reminder of the betrayal. On the other, it was impossible not to feel something stir in my heart as I watched her belly grow. I remember the first ultrasound I attended with her. She hesitated to ask me to come, afraid it would be too painful, but I decided to go anyway. Sitting in that dim room, the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the air. It was steady, strong, and so undeniably alive. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected, hope. Would you like to see your baby? The technician asked, oblivious to the complicated reality of our situation. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the screen. There it was, a tiny, wriggling life. My throat tightened as I tried to process the mix of emotions coursing through me. It wasn't my child, not biologically, but in that moment, it felt like it didn't matter. Afterward, as we sat in the car, she looked at me nervously. "What are you thinking?" I took a deep breath, the words coming slowly. I want to try. I don't know how, but I want to try to love this baby. To be a father." Her tears came instantly, and she grabbed my hand tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll never take this for granted. I promise." As the months passed, the baby became a bridge between us. Preparing the nursery, attending childbirth classes, and choosing a name gave us something to focus on beyond our pain. I began to see glimpses of the woman I had married, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand like she never wanted to let go. When the day finally came, it was both terrifying and transformative. The labor was long, and I was by her side every step of the way, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When the baby was born, a wave of emotions crashed over me. The nurse placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and she looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Do you want to hold him?" I hesitated for just a moment before nodding. As I took the baby in my arms, something inside me shifted. He was so small, so vulnerable, and in that instant, I realized that none of this was his fault. He hadn't asked to be born into a complicated situation. All he needed was love. "I think he looks like you," she said softly, a hopeful smile on her face. I chuckled, shaking my head. "Nice try. But he's perfect anyway." In that moment, I made a choice. I didn't know what the future would hold, or if our marriage would ever fully heal, but I knew one thing: I would love this child as my own. Because sometimes, love isn't about blood or biology, it's about showing up even when it's hard. And so, our story continued, not perfect, not easy, but ours. One step, one day, one act of love at a time. The first few months of parenting were a whirlwind. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the fragile cries of a newborn consumed our lives. The challenges were immense, but amidst the exhaustion and chaos, something unexpected began to happen. I found myself bonding with the baby, my son. He wasn't just a symbol of our fractured past anymore, he was a person, with his own quirks, needs, and tiny victories. The first time he wrapped his tiny fingers around mine, I felt a warmth I couldn't explain. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward healing. My wife, too, seemed transformed. She devoted herself fully to our son and to us. She worked tirelessly to prove that she was committed to rebuilding what we had lost. Every gesture, every apology, every quiet moment she spent with me spoke of her remorse and determination. One evening, as we sat together on the couch with our son asleep in my arms, she broke the silence. "Do you regret staying?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I looked at her, then down at the baby. The answer wasn't simple, but it was honest. "There are days when it's hard," I admitted. "When I remember what happened, and it still hurts. But I don't regret staying. Not anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand. "I never stopped trying to make it right," she whispered. And she didn't. Over time, the scars of betrayal began to fade. They didn't disappear completely. Some things leave marks that never fully heal, but they stopped defining our relationship. One evening, about a year after our son was born, we found ourselves looking through old photos from before everything had changed. Pictures of vacations, family gatherings, and quiet moments together. "We were happy," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. I nodded. "We were. And we can be again. It will just be different." She smiled faintly. "Different doesn't have to be bad." As the years went by, we rebuilt our life together. It wasn't without challenges, but it was real. Our son grew into a curious, spirited boy who brought light into every room he entered. And every time he called me Daddy, I was reminded that love isn't just about where we start, it's about where we're willing to go. On our 5th wedding anniversary, we stood in our backyard, watching our son chase fireflies. She slipped her hand into mine, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I love you, she said, her voice steady and sure. I love you too, I replied. It wasn't a perfect love, but it was ours. And that was enough. As time went on, our family grew stronger in ways I never thought possible. The wounds from the past had not disappeared, but they had become part of the fabric of our story, a reminder of where we'd been and how far we'd come. Our son, Ethan, became the glue that held us together. His laughter filled the house, his curiosity pushed us to be better, and his unconditional love reminded us of the power of second chances. He didn't care about the complexities of his beginnings. To him, we were simply his parents. On his 4th birthday, as we watched him excitedly unwrap his presents surrounded by family and friends, I realized how much joy he had brought into my life. He had reshaped my heart, teaching me that love is not about perfection but about persistence. After the party, when everyone had left and Ethan was fast asleep, my wife and I sat together in the living room, sipping on coffee and reminiscing. Do you ever think about how far we've come? She asked, her voice soft. All the time, I admitted. There were moments I didn't think we'd make it. But looking at him, looking at us now, I'm glad we didn't give up. She reached for my hand, her eyes glistening. You didn't just save us. You saved me. I never stopped being grateful for that. I squeezed her hand, my heart full. We saved each other. A few months later, she surprised me with news that shook me once again, but this time, it was different. I'm pregnant, she said one evening, her voice trembling with both excitement and apprehension. For a moment, I was silent, processing what she had just said. Then, a slow smile spread across my face. This time, I said, pulling her into an embrace, we'll do it together from the very start. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt an overwhelming sense of completeness. When our second child was born, a little girl with my eyes and her mother's smile, it was as if the final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Watching Ethan with his baby sister brought tears to my eyes. He adored her from the moment he met her, showering her with hugs and kisses. Our family wasn't perfect. There were still tough days, old fears that resurfaced occasionally, and moments when the past threatened to intrude. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the love we had built and the life we had created together. On our 10th anniversary, we stood in the same backyard where Ethan had once chased fireflies, now joined by our daughter, who giggled as her brother spun her in circles. My wife leaned against me, her hand resting on mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a profound sense of peace. We made it, she whispered. I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. Yeah. We did. Our story was never meant to be easy. It was messy, complicated, and filled with unexpected turns. But in the end, it was ours, a testament to the resilience of love and the strength it takes to forgive, heal, and grow. And for that, I was grateful every single day. The years that followed were filled with milestones that marked both the passage of time and the strength of our love. Ethan grew into a thoughtful and protective older brother, and our daughter, Lily, blossomed into a vibrant and curious spirit who loved to paint, sing, and explore the world around her. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Lily holding up her latest crayon masterpiece for everyone to admire, Ethan said something that caught me off guard. Dad, when did you know you wanted to stay with Mom after everything? My fork paused midair. Ethan was 10 now, And though we'd never hidden the truth about his origins, we had shared it carefully, in pieces appropriate for his age. He knew I wasn't his biological father, but he'd always called me dad without hesitation. My wife looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise, but she said nothing, allowing me to answer. I set my fork down and leaned forward, looking at Ethan. That's a big question, buddy. I guess the simplest answer is, when I realized that love isn't just about the good times. It's about showing up when it's hard, choosing each other even when things feel broken. Ethan nodded, his young mind trying to process the weight of my words. So, you chose me, too? I smiled, my chest tightening with emotion. I didn't just choose you, Ethan. You taught me how to love in a way I didn't know I could. You made me a better man, a better dad. And I choose you again 1,000 times over. He grinned, his cheeks flashing with pride. Thanks, Dad. I love you. I love you too, kiddo. Later that night, after the kids were tucked in, my wife and I sat together on the couch. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her fingers tracing absent patterns on my hand. You always know the right things to say, she whispered. I chuckled softly. Not always. But with Ethan, it's easy. Loving him has never been hard, even if the circumstances were. She sat up and looked at me, her expression serious. Do you ever regret the path we took? Staying, building this life together. I didn't even have to think about it. No, I said firmly. If anything, I think what we went through made us stronger. It forced us to confront who we are and what we want to be for each other and for our family. I wouldn't change a thing. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled. I don't deserve you. I kissed her forehead and pulled her close. You deserve every bit of love and forgiveness we've built together. We deserve this. As we sat there, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater and the soft murmur of the wind outside, I thought about how far we'd come. Life had tested us in ways I never imagined, but it had also given us something extraordinary, a family forged through love, forgiveness, and resilience. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is. But it was real, and it was ours. And for that, I was endlessly grateful.